Go off now. Okay, so what I wanted to do really is to show you that there are real benefits in managing fatigue. It isn't a mamby-pamby subject whatsoever. The business benefits are exceptional, really. So if I just go through with them. So let's go through, right. So in Toll, we use real live data. We have machines on our trams which actually manage they have all the data from the drivers about whether they're fatigued or they're not. And from that, we can do rosters, we can manage their duties, we can manage them. And so that's a really, really good thing. We can see the trends around our network about where there are potentially issues where fatigue could happen. We have a significant amount of high and low load working. High load, they will never make a mistake because they're very alert. But as soon as they go into a low work area, they sort of switch off mentally. So we use fatigue and welfare management arrangements to help identify unknown health issues. Some of the benefits that we had from this is that we didn't even realise we were going to have. But we've identified sleep apnea, underactive thyroid, diabetes, high blood pressure, etc. And one of my staff, who she had an underactive thyroid, she had no idea, but the Guardian machine kept going off on her. And so we sent her to the occupational health, and he explained to her just how serious an underactive thyroid is and that she hadn't got medication for it. And she came to see me and she said, "Thank you, Jackie, for saving my life." Now, that is incredibly humbling when somebody says that. Sleep apnea, mainly when people live on their own, they don't really understand that they've got sleep apnea because nobody hears them snoring and things. But, you know, we've identified a few of those. Blood pressure, you know, lots of people have that. It's not called the hidden killer for nothing. And so they've been real benefits that we didn't even know that we were going to get. We've introduced a just culture, which is fair, which strengthens our employee trust, because to manage fatigue, you do need to be able to have trust between you and your employees. And so that we can focus on health, well-being, eating well, exercise and mental well-being. I was talking, earlier is that the issue is within this industry and many industries is that we actually want to manage symptoms of fatigue and not the cause. So you'll see many, many seminars and things about mental well-being, physical well-being. But the fact is that the reason that most of those people are in that state is because of sleep debt. And so, it's really important that people understand about their well-being. We're having really clear engagement between our employer and our family. We've held open days our families. So we've invited children and their spouses, and we've explained about why mummy or daddy need to go to bed early, why they need to eat properly, why the whole family needs to support shift workers. And one of the great things about it is the children really pick that up. And I think it's a bit like when people stop smoking, a lot of that time that they stopped smoking was because their children said to them, "Daddy, I don't want you to die." And so these children go, and some of the drivers came to me and said, "What on earth have you said to my son?" Because he's at 8 o'clock, he said, "Daddy, it's time for you to go to bed." And there's nothing more powerful than that. They used to eat McDonald's and Burger King and Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is all very bad when you've got a sedentary job. And now they're coming in and they've got plastic containers that they either put into the microwave or they've got it cold. And if anybody brings a Big Mac in, the abuse that they get because they're eating this thing because it's bad for them, you know. So that's really good. We have a clear management fatigue process where nobody can say they don't understand what the rules are. This is not an easy thing for anybody. We use insights on hours of work, hours of rest to build up our rosters, about early and late finishes and the impact that has on people. And we develop fatigue-based rules for our rosters and duties using the toll data that we get from the machine. And what this has done is reduce the number of fatigue-related incidents, and I'll show you later how significant that is. So we've had a 5-year journey so far. It's not all been easy. I have to tell you, if it was easy, anybody could do it, couldn't they? But the Guardian is a real time fatigue. It monitors distraction and fatigue. And the good thing about this is that the first person knows they've got a problem is the driver themselves. So it isn't Big Brother looking at them saying that you've done this wrong. So and so when the event is detected, the driver receives an immediate in-cab audio and seat vibration. So most of you, I presume, have been over the rumble strips on the roundabouts. Well, it's worse than that. So you wouldn't sleep through any of that. So that's what happens. And distraction, you know, most of what goes on is in the front of their cab and not them looking out the side. So if they look out the side, an alarm comes. Fatigue includes restlessness, yawning, tunnel vision, drooping of the eyelids, and microsleeps. And distraction is when they keep moving their heads. And this device that we use is actually bespoke to our company Toll, because our drivers have selected the alarms and the range and how long the intervals are and the triggers. And the device is active all of the time, but we have blackout zones to enable us to be able to shunt, because, you know, they are looking down and you don't want this thing going off there. So when we work in the depot, this sort of shows you what the Guardian looks at. It looks at their eyes, their nose and their mouth. And if their eyes droop or their heads go back, then it actually was sound. And this is one of our cabs. There's a bit of a problem with the trade unions about mentioning the word camera. So we call it a device. It's much nicer. It makes us all feel more fluffy. And we have 2 infrared sensors, and they're fitted in the cab. And I can tell you that our drivers don't even know that those are in there anymore, because they've been there for so long, so they don't take it out. So our journey has been how it works. The driver attention returns to the track once they've got the auditable alarm and also the vibration of their seat. The driver then recognises that they've got symptoms of fatigue. Now, I'm going to say something that you might find a bit strange, but I can assure you that not one person knows they've had a microsleep. So what happens is, because you may have been on the motorway and thought, oh, I don't know, I got here quite quickly. What happens is, when they have one, they look at what, after they've woken up, is they look to see what's happening around them. So if they're holding a pen and they've dropped the pen, they'll say, it was when I dropped the pen. I was looking at my speedo, I was looking at something, right? They weren't looking at anything, right? But we only allow 4 seconds for that to happen, so it's not a big deal. But so then that information is sent to a call centre actually in Arizona. I really want to meet these people because they must have very dull lives that they spend, because every single one of these alarms is looked at by a human being. So so they diagnose whether it's a real alert or whether it's not, and then they contact my control room, and then my control room contact the driver and going, "Are you all right?" And they'll go, "Yeah, I don't know what went wrong there," to me, and just to make sure that they're okay. So for me, this isn't about the machine. The machine is my final bit. If everything else goes wrong in their life, that I've got the machine to actually wake them up. But it's about the data that we get from the machine. So the information we get is date, time, location, what type of alert, the distance they travelled, the speed that they were travelling, and what shift that they're on. And in the first year, we had 53%, and we reduced from 17 to 8 in the first year. And so, as I say, some of these had unknown health issues, and the drivers see this as some sort of sense of security, really, that actually they know that we're looking after them. So that's that. We employed a company called Clockwork. I don't know if anybody's heard of them. They mainly are in the aviation industry. They deal with pilots, and they helped us with our fatigue risk management system, and because they're experts in the field. One of the things that we all look at on our rosters is the Health and Safety Fatigue Index. On its own, I don't believe it is adequate to be able to measure fatigue. So we also use something called SafeFast, which actually looks at the time that the staff are away from work as well as when they're in work. So we use both of those indexes to measure our rosters. And we use the real life data from our people. So we probably have one of the only rosters in the world that are rosters that are based on information from our own drivers. So when we assessed it, all of the things, so what we did, if you look at that slide, the blue is before and the orange is after. And if I could tell you that most of that was only done by looking at their roster and looking at where their breaks are. So the unions wanted us to have the short duty at the end of the shift because they could go home early, right? Very bad thing. So we swapped it. So it was at the beginning, because actually if you got up at 2:30 in the morning, the chances of you having a cup of tea and a piece of toast is quite small. So we just flipped it over. And the other thing we did was we used to have breaks on a Sunday of more than an hour. And we had quite a few fatigue incidents. We reduced it to 1 hour, and we reduced the amount of fatigue incidents by 50% just by doing that. So, and then that Sunday to show you what happens about reducing their breaks from 2 hours to 1. It's pretty incredible, isn't it? So the just culture. So when I said to my managers, we're going to encourage drivers to ring in and say if they're too fatigued to drive. So you can imagine what the outcome of that was. They were all going to ring, weren't they? They were all going to ring up and say because they wanted the day off. And I said, no, you have to trust the system. So anyway, I tell you that doesn't happen. We have very few that ring in because we're looking after their whole well-being. But if they do, so we record the reason for why they're unfit. A report's done, and then we ask the person who's rung in to have enough sleep and then come in and see us to do non-safety critical job, but just to come in and see and talk about why they think they're fatigued. So this is not a day off. And from there, they develop a personal fatigue management plan, which is their plan, which we support them with. And that's what's really important, because it's about them. It's not about us telling them what they're going to do. So the easiest thing would be to do a sleep diary, right? Well, I don't know what that means, but anyway, so they do all that. If they report that they're too fatigued while they're on duty, we take them off at the nearest available time to get them off the tram. We stop them doing any safety critical work. They also come back and fill in a form with their fatigue report to the depot, and then they're asked why they think that they can't finish their shift. And they also develop a personal fatigue plan, which is theirs, which we support. And then the most important thing is if they are too tired to drive a tram, then they must be too tired to drive their car home, because it's no different, is it? So we say to them, oh, you can't drive it, so you're going to have to leave your car in the depot. So they either go home by public transport, or they get someone to give them a lift or whatever, and we take their keys so that they can't take it. So it's really, really important that happens. And we've had some fantastic results from this. And we have to remember that we can make the best rosters in the world. We can make the best duties in the world. We can give them all the tools that they need to actually manage their fatigue. But there is personal responsibility. So if you are up all night, which appears to be a blokey sort of thing, I don't know too many women that do it, playing with Xboxes till 11 o'clock at night, and you have to get up at 2:30, 3 o'clock, what do you think is going to happen? So what we've done is we've explained to them about their circadian rhythms. If you come to Toll, they will all tell you whether they are an owl or whether they're a lark. They will understand that shift work is fighting their circadian rhythms all of the time, and what they need to do to manage that. That isn't easy, and it's not been an easy journey to get there, but they understand what their personal responsibility is. I'm also not saying that this is easy, because it doesn't also mean that we don't get rid of people. And we've unfortunately had to say goodbye to a couple of people because they do not take that personal responsibility themselves, and you can help them as much as you can. And the other thing that's interesting is that when you look at operating incidents, which is a bit of a bathtub curve, you look at fatigue and it matches that curve. So, it is, and this is probably one of the most powerful slides that you can have. You want to bite my hands off for that. Okay, and I can confirm that our self-reporting has gone up by 316%. Our collisions have gone down by 40%. Our sickness has gone down to 3.8%. And as businesses, you can see the benefits of that, because that's what happened. And I think what we also have to understand, none of you want to be in the position that I'm in past that Sandilands. I went to court last Friday because the ORR has prosecuted us. You wouldn't want any of your staff to be the driver that has been prosecuted under the Health and Safety at Work Act, and is looking at the potential of going to prison. The reason that 7 people died at Sandilands in 2016 is because that driver had sleep debt. And so it is our responsibility to give our staff the tools that they need to manage their lives, and for us to be able to manage our part of that relationship by doing decent rosters, giving them enough time between shifts. If we have a single rest day now, which we tried desperately not to have, we ensure there's 33 hours between that shift, because they have to go to sleep twice. And some of the time we talk about the 12-hour shifts, 12 hours between shifts. But if you only go to sleep 1.5 times, which, if you're not careful, that will happen. And we've come a very long way, and nobody could be prouder of me than I am of the people of Toll and where they've got to. So, next bit is, if there's any questions. Yes.
You mentioned about owls and larks. I was particularly interested about that because I very much think of myself as being an owl. And I wonder whether when you roster people onto shifts, is that something you therefore take into account? Do you tend to treat people differently depending upon those patterns?
Yeah, I mean, I have some people that go, oh, I can't do early mornings. And they can't, but they could be up half the night. What we do is, I mean, we actually have people that work permanent earlies, permanent lates. That's a very bad thing to work permanent anything, because you are really fighting that circadian rhythm, right? So if they work earlies or lates, we need to give them additional tools to enable them to work that. So, for example, if you're on a late, permanent late, you probably get home about 3 o'clock in the morning. Your children get up at 7 o'clock to go to school. There's not a lot of sleep, is it? Then your partner goes, take them to school, will you? Right. So then you do a bit of shopping, and then they have power naps in the afternoon. God knows what they are, right? So you go back to work at between 5 and 6. You keep doing that, right? Dead earlies are the same. They get up at 2:30 to be in at work for quarter to 3. They finish about 3, 4 o'clock. They pick the kids up from school. They get their tea. Their spouse goes to work in the evening. You know, especially if they've got teenagers, they don't go to school. You know, all of those things. And that's why we work with the families as well, to explain that they can't be up at 11 o'clock at night to be able to go. So yeah, it's just that they understand if they're night people or early day people. We do some of them where they just go, I just can't do before 6. Right. And if they can't do that, then we usually can accommodate them. But yeah.
I was just ask, has this factored at all into your recruitment for new clients? If you're really looking at predisposition for health conditions or anything like
yeah.
early or late?
Yeah, so everybody in the company goes on a fatigue training course, and that's from the executive down. So when I drink coffee at 9 o'clock at night, I know that I'm not supposed to drink it, really. So because you're not supposed to drink caffeine until 4 hours before you go to bed. So we lead from the top, so we all go on it. Any new entrants, we teach them about fatigue and shift work in the first 2 weeks of them being there. So if they, because when you know how much these drivers earn, you can do anything in an interview. So we try to explain to them like how difficult it is. And they go on the fatigue course sort of straight away. And then we have refreshers for all of our staff going through the year, just to reinforce the message. And, you know, there are some people that can't work shift work, and it's no insult on them. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just some people just can't do it. And we easily can recognise that now. So yeah, our fatigue training is great. We do some of it online, and it's all our own people. So it's my own managers, it's my own drivers, and so they can actually recognise each other. And we have this online quiz for them to do before they actually start the fatigue training. So.
Yes. Can you go back to the slide that's the results was?
Yes, I'll do best endeavours there.
A couple of questions on that. I guess just create a new slide.
Oh, I don't want to create any of those slides, but. That one, was it that one? Or the 52% one?
It was the one that showed the percentage year on year.
Okay, so that's. Oh, no, it's not. Let me start from the beginning. Get rid of that. Oops, save. Okay. Yeah, could you get us back to what?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what is the slide that does the 72%?
Question.
Yeah, go on then.
Yeah.
Look at it from this
Yeah.
One was, there seemed to be a bit of an annual pattern beginning to emerge of there seemed to be some sort of peaks and troughs during the year. So I
Yeah.
wonder whether you were seeing some sort of by period part of the year issue beginning to emerge now as being the problem.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues that we have, we drive east to west, and the sun's always in their eyes. It's also time of day. A lot of it is 1 o'clock sort of time, 1300 is pretty bad, 1600. And the worst times are if they're about to go on annual leave or when they come back. Because we're now introduced something called Focus 100, which means you have to focus 100% of the time, right? Because they just switch off. And because they've been on holiday and they've slept in till 10 o'clock in the morning, and then the next, they come back to work and they've had to get up at 2:30, they struggle. So every time they go on annual leave, we do try to explain to them it's really good for you to actually go to bed at least, or try to go to bed at a reasonable time. The other one on rest days, which is quite challenging to do, but a rest day isn't an annual leave day. So if they are on earlies, they need to be getting up about the same time as they would have done if they were going to work, because
We need to go now, I think.
because otherwise it just, they're in real trouble. And some of the fatigue conversations we've had are quite interesting. So they, when they ring up and say, "Oh, too fatigued to come in," and they've been on like a couple of rest days, and you go like, "Well, what have you been to do for the rest days?" And basically, some of them become couch potatoes and watch Netflix all day. And you're bound when you go to bed at like 8 o'clock at night not to be tired, don't you? So when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, is a bit of a problem that you're like too tired to go to work. So we go. So the root cause of you being too fatigued is you were a couch potato for that day. So there is a whole raft of, when you look at all of those, is a lot of it is time of day, and that's because the sugar levels just go down. I don't know what we did. We might have broken it.
It's okay.
So yeah, but now we're not looking at a forest. We're actually not looking at a tree. We're actually looking at a twig now because of the information that we have, and so we can restructure everything. We have fatigue meetings every quarter with our trade unions and our health and safety reps about going through the roster, going through the fatigue instance. I mean, now we're down to probably 5 a period with different drivers. None of them are the same anymore. Oh, thank you. So, right, let me. So I mean, I did have one that had about 39, and I think it's about time that we did something about it. He said, "No, I'm super alert." Goodness knows what that meant. And actually, he had too much going on in his life. And he was getting married, he was moving, he just had a baby, and it was all just too much. And he didn't want to see. Some of the drivers want to see the video clip. It's an encrypted video. And it only works if the driver does something that they're not supposed to do. And we sorted him out. He's never set that guardian off since. And he also, when he got married, he brought me in a present to thank me for the fact that he was able to get married and to keep his job. So we've got some great stories, and the fact is that we can all talk about fatigue in toll. We have set up some groups in the last 18 months, even within COVID. We have quite a lot of parents with autistic children. It's very difficult to do shift work with autistic children. And so this is a self-help group where they all talk about, some of them, their children are now adults, some of them are teenagers, some of them are very young, and they actually support each other in how they get round actually being able to come to work to do shift work. We're setting up a diabetes one now. My ops director is a type 1 diabetic, but you know how you can live with diabetes and do that. We've got a women's group, and these are all groups they've set up themselves to enable them to be able to manage fatigue. So yeah, it's a similar shape, but it just gets smaller. Really, so yeah.
I wonder whether there was some sort of annual sort of thing where you change or something like that.
No, the clock. I will always thought that there is data behind that to show it, but the clocks actually don't have any effect on them. It's normally other things, and most of that is what they do rather than what we do. But yeah, actually, if I ever wanted to put most powerful slide on, that has to be it, really.
We have an online question from Danny, asking if there are any seasonal factors. You've got some little bumps there.
Yeah, as I say, the sun is when it's, because we drive east to west, the sun, and our cabs aren't great, so we have to one of our cabs is a Bombardier tram, and it only has air coolant rather than air conditioning in it, and that cab gets up to 45 degrees. They fry in there, and so you know we have to keep on about keeping the windows open. We give them towels, you know, cold towels, water. The Stadlers are slightly better, they've got air conditioning in them, but yeah, so when it's very hot, when it's very cold, the problem when they're very cold, of course, is they put lots of layers on and they get very warm and they put the heater on. And then you go, oh, it's all like snug in here. You go, no. So yeah, we're like autumn, of course, is a bit of an issue for them. So yeah, we like anybody in the National Rail or the tramway, is that we have seasonal briefs and things for them. So yeah, that's where we go from that.
Just going on from your setup there, do you go through actually setting up driving position type of thing, so you can see height and brief for the wheel and right?
Yeah, right. So when they come and we train them, we train them to sit in a upright position. Before we had the Guardian machine, you'd think some of them were on their like settees at home. They had them like leaning far back. Then they wondered why they set the Guardian off. And I said, well, if you sat up properly, you probably wouldn't, would you? But incredibly, since we've done that, we've had less back problems as well, because actually their postures, you know, and they sat up straight because they thought if they didn't sit up straight that this machine would go off, right? So actually our back problems have significantly got better as well. And none of these things we'd planned for, you know, they are just a direct result of all of the other things that we do. Yeah, they did think they were watching the telly at some point, some of them.
We've got another question online from Tudor, who's a safety manager. Have there been any incidents that have occurred that Guardian did not pick up? If so, how many?
Yes, there's a couple which I'm trying to work with seeing machines at the moment. It's when the driver, I'd say, probably phases out, when they're like looking straight in front of them, but their eyes aren't dropping. So it's like when they're, and then they do really stupid things like don't stop or something, or go through signals. So that whole, so we're trying to work with seeing machines that says if they're looking straight out, but their eyes aren't moving, that we need something to do that as well. So the Guardian does what it says it's on the tin, but actually because now we realise that actually there's times when the driver is actually not blinking because they're not there like this, it can't pick that up. But that's the only thing. It can see through sunglasses. I mean, I had a couple of drivers that put skiing goggles on because they thought that it was sunglasses with the reflective on the front. I think they can't do that. So, oh yeah, I've had it all. So yeah, but for us, that's the only time is when the driver doesn't blink.
Right. Okay. Interesting that you've managed to work around with unions, because come across them in my former life, it can be incredibly difficult. So I'm surprised that you've managed to get the system
Right.
by it.
Well, the ASLEF are very anti-cameras. They will not have them in their cabs whatsoever. So this was quite difficult, and actually we nearly had a strike over it, just so you know, because the drivers thought that we were killing them. Because they'd gone on Google's great thing to see what the worst thing with infrared can do for you. So we had runny eyes, dry eyes, headaches, we were giving them skin cancer, the whole thing. So I said, okay, let's just take this all very seriously. Don't just say, don't be so stupid. So we sent them to opticians, GPs, occupational health, and eventually we had to have Public Health England in to do a report. I don't know if any of you work with Public Health England. But this man came who was incredibly dull, but he did all of the tests on the infrared, and he was there the whole day, and we made the union reps spend the whole day with them, and they were like looking at me going, please let me go. No, you wanted this, you can have it. Public Health England came back, was there's more infrared in your remote control telly than there is in this. And overnight we had no dry eyes, wet eyes, nothing. But it just shows that when something where you think you've got something, it becomes real. The unions were very anti the camera. And so my way around this is it's on trial. So nobody signed it off, but they all know that it's a permanent trial. And as I've said to the unions, it's not the camera that you need to be worried about, it's what we do with the information from the camera. And I now chair the industry group fatigue group, and we are proposing to put these devices on 3 train companies as a pilot going forward. So that's how far we've got. Because of the work we've done at Croydon, we can then share that information with other companies, including freight, because freight's very difficult, to actually say that this is a no-brainer, you know. And I'm not saying that everybody should go out buying Guardians, because I don't want to give seeing machines lots of money. But and I don't get any out of it, you know. But what we do need is something that gives us the data for us to then manage our businesses.
You mentioned about the thyroid issue that was
Yes.
picked up earlier, and yet the Guardian looks at people's faces and so on. So I'm imagining that it didn't pick up that particular issue.
No,
you could see something
she was drowsy.
Yeah. So what was that? Was that as a result of being drowsy and not immediately being able to work out what it was?
Yeah.
And therefore went through a series of
Yeah,
tests or something?
yes. So she set it off a few times. I mean, not a huge amount, but she set up. And we just said, look, you know, there must be something wrong, because this is like really odd. And so we sent her to our occupational health. They did some tests, saw that there was potential for an underactive thyroid. She went to a GP, and that's where it was diagnosed. And she now takes the medication. She's not very good at taking the medication, so every so often the Guardian goes off. So I did explain to her that she could actually go online and not do it that way, rather than go to the doctors and get a prescription. But yeah, but that could have been really serious, because she had no idea. I've had 2 sleep apneas. They didn't know either. They could have died. So, you know, it's, as I say, we never even set out to do any of that. High blood pressure, of course, because you do get quite tired with high blood pressure. So yeah, those are add-ons that we've found for it. But if I could just reinforce that it's just not about the machine, it's not about keeping them away, it's about their lifestyles, about what we do, and it's the benefits to our companies of if we manage their fatigue. I mean, if you can imagine, even for collisions, how much that costs a year. And self-reporting is just so important, so that you know what's going on out there. So, but it is about trust, and the just culture can't come overnight, but we all need to work at it. That and we've got an error and violation policy at Toll, so everybody knows what an error is and everybody knows what a violation is. And actually a violation is also not reporting an error.
Query on John, do you see this technology applying to cars for people interested? Do you see it applying to trucks?
Trucks and, I mean, lots of new cars are having that sort of technology fitted to them now. I just bought one today. I just got fed up and just bought a new car this morning, which is so, but yeah, cars are having it, trucks, Guardians are in trucks, but the other people, of course, are people that work in control rooms, signallers, controls in airlines, all of that technology can be used in any of those places as well, because they're making safety critical decisions all the time. So yes.
Hi, are you starting to get, it sounds from the way you're talking as if you're starting to get the support of the driving community now?
Yes.
I got the impression that in the first place it may well have been a challenging thing to introduce, and over time it almost feels like they're appreciating that it's there. Is that your reflection?
That's absolutely, yeah, and and it's just the acceptance of it. It's about talking about it, and they see it as a benefit to them now and not a disbenefit. I think in the beginning they thought it was like us trying to catch them out and punish them and all of those sorts of things for it, but they're seeing that's not what we're doing. And as I say now, if I asked a driver, where's the Guardian machine in your cab, I doubt whether they'd remember where it was, because they just don't see it anymore. They do get quite cross when it goes off, especially when their heads are back and everything. And they swear, which is very rude, right? So I say to them, language, Timothy, do you know what I mean? It's like but yeah, some of them want to see it, some of them don't, and there's no problem either way. I mean, nobody forces them to. It's quite powerful when they see it, but you can still manage it without them seeing it. Is there anything else? But it really is. It's not, and we had no more drivers of it, no more managers because of it. We just different.
Do the washing up.
Got a question about how would you see this sort of technology being implemented a bit more? I got digital twins of obviously equipment going forward and different components, but sort of like digital twin of the person in some aspects where you're monitoring sort of the well-being and the performance. So if you've got sort of surgeons or different sort of pilots and different things going forward, and that way you've got like a physical digital twin of a person and you possibly can predict things a bit more.
I mean, I think whatever technology you want, I mean, there are people that use stuff that you wear. There's like bracelets, there's all sorts of things. I'm a bit sceptical on those because you can take them off. Because I don't trust anybody, I suppose. But there are, and all of that. It's a bit. But everybody says that they don't need a lot of sleep, but everybody needs between 7 and 9 hours. And Margaret Thatcher, she only needed 3, but she ended up with dementia. You look at how many people end up with strokes and dementia and all of those things, and look at their lives to see how much sleep they had. And none of us want, when we retire, that we've gone through sleep debt for 30, 40 years to not enjoy our retirements.
There's no sort of interlinking back into the tram, is there? So it sets the alarm, but if somebody didn't react to that because, I don't know, they had some medical condition that's more severe or something, it doesn't do anything to slow the...
Guardian doesn't know, no, but there'd be somebody on that radio quicker than you could say Jack Robinson. Yeah, we have an emergency brake on there now for high-risk areas. So yeah, but you'd be hard pushed even if you weren't well to sleep through that. But yeah, the Guardian doesn't stop the tram, but we have other things on the tram that will stop. I hope you found that useful.
One more question
Yeah.
online. So I'm not sure. How can the company protect passenger security from the use of camera detector? I imagine it goes through the cab.
No, it doesn't. It literally, the camera's in front of the driver. There's no way. I mean, all trams have CCTV inside the tram, outside the tram. That's really why we catch most of our knife crime in Croydon. Bless them, because they want to travel on the tram. So they must wonder why they get somebody knocking on their door quite soon after they've stabbed somebody. But no, the camera cannot go. It's not even set up. It's only set up for the eyes, nose and mouth of the driver.
Yeah, so what do we say?
Yeah, it can't go anywhere. No.
Would it be any sort of way to disable that, or would it be sort of, if it can't fail, or could it, if it's something,
If it fails, the tram doesn't go out.
right, okay.
It's not a safety critical piece of equipment, but we use it for safety critical reasons. So as engineers, you've probably got this thing about safety critical equipment, and us operators can't really understand all that. But yeah, it's not classed as a safety critical piece of kit. But if it doesn't work, we don't let the trams out.
I know it's not all about the device and everything.
It isn't.
However, my next question-
That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's not about the device.
My next question is there anything that the people who manufacture the device and the software on it and so on, is there anything that they've learned from you that's led to them improving the device as a result of any of the feedback?
Yes, they have. Because they're an Australian mining company. That's where they started in the first place. And so they've had lots of different upgrades to the system since we started to use it. And they're looking at, a bit like looking at about when drivers don't blink. That would never have come unless we've done that. There are many truckers that use it. Eddie Stobart, all of those people use it but they use it not the same way as us. They use it because their cargo is more valuable than the driver, and they want to protect it. And I just want to be like, so that it keeps the drivers awake when they're travelling many hundreds of miles. And so when we've got a Guardian group, and when I meet the truckers, it's always quite amusing about the difference in how we use this machine. Well, they have millions of pounds on the back, of course.
Sorry, did you have this device on the train, on the crash in Croydon?
No, we didn't have it. It's just a direct result of that. And as I say, nobody wants to be where Toll is at the moment. We've gone through police investigation, which came out there was no criminal, they couldn't prosecute criminally, went to CPS. We then had 10-week inquest, which is probably the worst 10 weeks of my life. And then we've just got the prosecution, and nobody wants to do what we're doing. I wasn't the MD at the time. Came in allegedly to put it better. But it's destroyed a lot of people's lives. And I've got drivers with post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not just the families, it's a lot of other people that have been affected.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of them.
And what I'm saying is you don't have to kill people to be able to do this. As an industry, we're just like, Ladbroke Grove at TPWS because of that. And it just seems we have to have major incidents before we wake up to things. But I'm trying to say we don't have to do that. You learn from just how dreadful our lives are, and just do it because it's the right thing to do. And the benefits, it's not just about being married families to our frontline staff. It's about look at the business benefits that you can get from it. Anything else?
That mostly thank yous.
Oh, right, okay. But thank you very much for listening. Right.
Thank you. Have a go.
Lots of price on it. Yeah. How many trams in total?